Do they get caught? Yes. Hey there, I'm Elise and welcome back to my channel. I think it's been 3 years? If you ask why, the honest answer is just that I was getting busier and busier until I just had too much on my plate to keep this channel running. I moved from Busan to Seoul and I started going to grad school, I started working part-time jobs, and eventually I got a full-time job in one of the most demanding companies I've ever worked in. But even though I had way too much going on, I always wanted to come back to my YouTube channel to make videos for you guys because I feel like the quote-unquote influencers out there are leaving out so much when it comes to what it takes to live here in Korea and all the different options that you have. So let's get real. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more advice, stories, and peeks into my real life in Korea. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to get part-time jobs here in Korea. This is something that I hope to make into a series. So today will be part-time jobs. Later on, I'll talk about getting a full-time job and then also internships and so on. I've been in Korea for about 5 years now, so I've done all kinds of work at all different levels, but I thought today let's just start small. So the first thing we have to do is address the legality. Can you legally work here in Korea? And this is something that actually a lot of people don't seem to ask themselves for some reason, oddly. The answer to this question depends a lot on which visa you're holding, and I haven't had every visa there is to have out there, but I'm going to talk about some of the main ones. So let's start with the tourist visa. Depending on which country you've come from, you either have an actual physical tourist visa or you have a period of stay during which you can stay here as a tourist. Regardless of the circumstance, you cannot legally work here in Korea, whether that be part-time, full-time, whatever. Do people do it anyway? Yes. Do people get caught doing it? Yes. I have seen so many people get caught working here when they were supposed to be a tourist. And you would think actually that immigration would have caught on sooner because the person was already here for 3 months traveling. Then they take a trip somewhere like Japan or somewhere close for a week, and then they come back and then they're here for another 3 months traveling, and this cycle continues for 5 years, some 10 years, and then eventually they get caught. Moving on, the next step up would be a student visa, and there are 2 types of student visas. One is the D4 visa, which is a language learning visa, and the other is a D2 visa, which is for students that are enrolled in a program at a university. So undergrad, grad students, PhD students, etc. On either of these visas, you can work a part-time job, but there are some catches. The first is that you have to have lived in Korea for 6 months first before you can legally work even a part-time job. And the expectation is during that first 6 months you would have just been studying. So I highly recommend that you come here with 6 months worth of living expenses first so you don't have to work a part-time job. And that's what I did. You also need to make sure that you maintain a certain GPA and that you've attended a certain amount of classes. I think it's 70%. Basically, they just want to make sure that you're actually a good student. And if at any time after you've applied to work part-time, if you've dropped under the GPA or you've dropped under the attendance, you'll lose your permission to work part-time. Do people fail to read the rules and work anyway? Yes. Do they get caught? Yes. And even if you think that you're getting away with it, Korea tracks all bank transactions. So unless you're getting paid in cash, under the table, or your employer is paying you directly from their own personal bank account where no taxes were being reported, you're already caught before you even showed up at immigration, so just don't do it. And when you get caught, your employer also gets caught, so they have to pay a huge fine and you have to pay a huge fine too. I think the most that I've ever heard, it depends on the case, how much you end up having to pay, but the most that I've ever heard, I think, was $10,000. And you pay this or you get deported, and you definitely don't want that to happen if you're a student. So I don't condone this. I don't condone working if you haven't, finished your 6 months of stay. I don't condone working if you don't meet the requirements as a student. Break the law at your own risk. Next up is the D10 visa, and this one is very tricky because it's a job seeker visa, so they already know that you don't have a job, but you can't work a part-time job. There is a loophole. The loophole is that you can work as an intern. So as long as your employer categorized you as an intern in your contract, you are free to work there. But this won't work for something like English teaching or a restaurant. It's more for an office job or a research job where the work that you're doing relates to the major that you just finished or the previous work that you were doing. And the goal is supposed to be for you to either learn something or for it to potentially turn into a full-time job, which is what you should also want when you get this visa. But I understand that things get hard sometimes. You just need to make money. You need a part-time job. In that case, I recommend that you look for office work or research work and just avoid English teaching or anything that's more manual labor, because this is not what this visa is for. This is also the visa that I've seen the most people get in trouble with, because I think compared to the other visas, it's still fairly new and people are very unclear about how long they can have the visa for, what work they can do on the visa, what they need to report to immigration, what their employer needs to report to immigration. So definitely read the regulations, and when in doubt, call immigration. All right, we're almost through. If you have an e-visa, aka a work visa, you already have a job. So I'm not really sure why you need a part-time job, but you can't do it anyway. I think you can slide through if you're doing freelance work or again something off the table where you're paid in cash. But as far as I know, this visa cannot have their full-time job, which is sponsoring their visa, and legally have a part-time job. Finally, if you're on an F visa, which is a residency visa, you can work part-time. This does not help you keep your visa if your visa is based on some kind of point system that involves income, but it won't make you lose your visa. At this point, you're going to want to check with your company. For example, the company that I was previously working in, it was against the regulations to have a part-time job on the side. But the company that I work for now, they don't care if we have part-time jobs as long as the part-time job is in a totally different industry than them. This varies by company. It's not about the law, it's about the company's regulations. But once you've signed the contract, you've agreed to that, which is legally binding. So you got to check with the company. If it doesn't say in their contract, I'm not saying to ask, but tread carefully if it's not explicitly written. In my case, it was explicitly written both times. So I knew in the first company, I shouldn't do that. And in the company now, I'm free to do whatever I want. Okay, so we're through with the back checking. That's all the visas that I know. If you have another visa, I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure what you're supposed to do, but we're gonna move on. Now let's get into the most important part. How do you find these part-time jobs? I think there are 4 major sources that I would recommend when you're looking for a part-time job. The first would be to check out some university career pages, and this is whether you're a student or not. Each university or even each specific department within the university will have a career page where employers can post about different jobs that are available to the students who go there or just anyone who happen to stumble across the page. If you want to look at specific departments, I would recommend checking the International Studies Department or the Business Administration Department, because this is where a lot of employers will be looking for people like you to fill their positions. A lot of the posts, they'll be looking for someone who is bilingual or multinational or familiar with a certain culture, so you're definitely going to want to check there. If you're not a student, sometimes you need a password to check these websites, but I think in most cases you don't need a password, so it's worth checking. I think that this is a great resource to check because there's a higher chance that the employer is looking for someone who's familiar with a certain audience. So in general, you won't be competing with Koreans per se. Next, you're going to want to look at job portals. And one of my personal favorites is called Hire Diversity. And the reason I like it is because they are specifically geared toward helping foreigners in Korea find part-time jobs, internships, and full-time jobs. So pretty much every listing, they are looking for foreigners. It just varies depending on what languages and what countries they're looking for someone to be from. They also have a career center that's open to the public where they can help you with resume writing, mock interviews, finding jobs that match your criteria, and so on. I checked recently and it seems like there are kind of waves for when employers are posting more listings versus less. So you're just going to want to check back regularly and see if there's anything new that's been posted. If nothing else, I think it would be good for finding out what companies are open to working with foreigners, what kind of work they need foreigners to do, and then you can visit that company's website and be on the lookout for any posts that they might be giving. There are other portals like Hire Diversity that are doing a similar thing where basically they're targeting foreigners who are looking for work here in Korea, but I don't have much experience with them. When I did check them out, it seems like there was a lot more manual work versus office work. So I'm not sure how many options there would be for part-time jobs that fit the restrictions of each visa, but I'll put a link down below so you can check out Hire Diversity and the other portals that are similar to Hire Diversity. All right, next up, you're gonna wanna check Facebook and Craigslist. There are a few Facebook groups, which again, I'll link down below. And they basically are a forum for employers to post about different jobs that, again, are specifically for foreigners or Koreans that are multicultural. I don't love this option because I feel like they're either hit or miss. The Facebook page is either too lax, so people are posting all kinds of sketchy stuff on there, or they're too rigid and strict, so people don't even want to post, or their posts disappear, so it's just defeating the purpose of the Facebook group. But I found jobs there. I know other people who have found their jobs there, so it's definitely worth having a look and just, vetting the company that posted. Craigslist is the same hit or miss kind of story. You just need to be insanely careful when you're using Craigslist. There are so many fake listings, there are so many illegal listings, and I feel like half of them are either sex trafficking or human trafficking. And I have known people who got caught up in these listings and really ended up in a situation that is legally categorized as human trafficking. Just as a rule of thumb, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. So anything like karaoke lounge waitress, or even a lot of the English teaching jobs that say that you don't need a visa to work there, all of that is illegal and you're about to get caught up into something, so just leave it alone. So out of the two of these, I'd stick to Facebook, but I know people who have gotten very lucky and they found really amazing jobs actually on Craigslist. So I'm not saying don't look at it, it's just that don't trust most of the listings. The last option that I'd recommend is using apps like Albamon or Chongu. The reason that I put this as one of the last options is simply that I don't have a lot of experience using these apps. I've downloaded them, I've checked them out, but I've never actually used one to apply to a part-time job, so I don't know what the success rate of this would be. It seems pretty straightforward. The employer posts about a position that's open and they're looking for an employee with these and these qualifications, and they put the salary, so it's not a secret. In my opinion, I think as long as you're legally able to work and you can prove to the employer that you're legally able to work, then there's no reason that they wouldn't consider you. I think that you just need to have pretty decent Korean skills, first of all, to use the app, and then to communicate with the employer because they probably weren't posting with you in mind. So this one is not a good option if you're not confident about your Korean. Okay, so that was the meaty part of the video. We've talked about can you legally work and where are the best sources for you to find a part-time job. Now let's go through a lightning round of just random questions that I feel like people are going to be wondering about when it comes to looking for a part-time job. All right, I wrote the questions down. We're going to whip out my phone with a very ugly case. First, what kind of part-time jobs can I do in Korea? I would say that the possibilities are pretty endless. It's more about what skills you have than any particular, set of jobs that are available for foreigners. You can work in face-to-face customer service, you can work as a waitress, you can work as an office assistant, you can work as a translator, you can work operating a social media account for a company. It just goes on and on. It's not really about like where you came from as far as what part-time jobs you can get. It's more about can you do the job and are you able to communicate with the target audience? So the number one piece of advice, and this is something that I've told all my foreigner friends, is if you want to work in Korea and have like a wide range of positions that you can apply for, you need to put some time and effort into learning Korean. That will get you farther than any degree, any resume skill set that you might think, set you aside. No, you need to speak Korean. If you don't, then the options are just like that much more limited for you. Okay, next question. What kind of part-time jobs have you had in Korea? Me, I've always been kind of leery about working as an English teacher here in Korea just because there's so many chances to get in trouble. Even though I'm a native speaker and I have certifications to teach English as a second language, I just didn't want to get caught. I didn't want to pay the fines and I didn't want to get deported. So what I've done is work as a digital content creator for a startup company. I worked as a digital content creator and also as a writer for a tourism, foreigner-based magazine here in Korea. I worked for an e-commerce company that was focused on cosmetics, and I worked as a paid marketing intern. And then later on, I went to a larger cosmetics company where I worked as a marketing assistant, and then I went on to convert to full-time and I worked as a business associate. So I've done a lot of different kinds of work, kind of different, but I didn't go for, the convenience store or waitressing or stuff like that just because I just saw too many people get in trouble. And I came to Korea already able to speak Korean and I had certain skill sets, so I mainly focused on that. So if you have certain skill sets and you speak Korean, you just have a lot more doors that are going to open for you. Do I need to speak Korean to get a part-time job? I think my answer for every question is going to be that it depends. Usually employers who are looking to hire foreigners don't expect them to do their work in Korean. They're more targeting them or looking for them to communicate with a consumer base in their native language and be familiar with their native culture. But you still have to be able to communicate with other staff members or your actual employer, and they might not be able to speak whatever language that is. So it would be much better for you. It would give you much better chances if you could speak Korean. That being said, it's not impossible to find a part-time job where you don't need to speak Korean. I've seen people do it before. I just feel like the process of finding the job took a bit longer for them, and the jobs that they got in the end, not all of them were the most kosher. They weren't, all on the level. So just be careful, I guess. Be careful. Do I need a permit to work part-time? Literally nobody asked this question, nobody. And I don't really understand why, because this is the thing that I see people get in trouble for the most. Like literally once a month. You need a permit if you want to work part-time. Like maybe you're a student and you fulfilled the requirements, maybe you're a whatever and you fulfilled the requirements, but that doesn't mean that you can just go get a job. You have to go get permission, like a stamp in your passport or some kind of piece of paper that says that immigration approved that you can have a part-time job. Like they checked that you matched the requirements and said yes. I've seen people who lost their job over this once the employer realized that they were supposed to have a permit and didn't have one. In the worst case scenario, I've seen people that went to apply for a different visa and it turns out they can't even get the better visa because they have this penalty on their record that they worked without a permit. And again, if you rewind back to what I said earlier, immigration already knows that you were working illegally because you have all these payments in your bank statement and you've been paying taxes for a work that you never reported that you were working at. So, go get a permit. And maybe your employer didn't tell you. A lot of the times these employers have not actually worked with foreigners before and they didn't know that there are different laws between hiring foreigners and hiring Koreans. The main difference just being that foreigners need a permit. So they probably won't tell you. And maybe your school knows these rules. They have international department. They have, what is it called? International student liaisons or something that are supposed to tell you these things. Sometimes they forget to mention it, or they gave you the website where the information was written and you didn't read it. So now you've watched my video. Now I have said to you that you need a permit. So there's no excuse. You need a permit. Go get it. The only exception is if you have a visa that excludes you from needing a permit to work part-time, which I think is only F visas. No excuses, guys. Okay, next. How many hours can I work? This depends on which visa you have. So students are going to have a limit of 20 to 40 hours depending on if they are a language student, an undergrad student, a grad student, or whatever. And it also varies depending on if you're during the semester or during a break. So make sure you check the guidelines for your situation. Everyone else, like not a student, you don't have any limit except for the legal limit of how many hours you can work in Korea, which I think is 52 hours a week. You can technically work up to 50 hours or more. It's not legal, but you're not the one that's going to get in trouble for that. But I don't know why you would want to work more than 52 hours in the week. And that would definitely be putting you at full-time hours, not part-time hours, but you know, you do you. How much can I make working part-time? That varies depending on what kind of work you are doing. But I think if you find a job that's offering something around 10,000 won, then that's a good offer and you should take that. I think the minimum wage these days is 8,700 something won. So you definitely don't want to take something under that, but if you can find something over that, then I'd say that that's a pretty good offer considering that it's above minimum wage. All right, we're getting to the end of it. Last question. Is it hard to find a part-time job in Korea? I think that there are plenty of sources available where you can find a part-time job. It's just a matter of whether those part-time jobs are, you know, in the scope of a foreigner, and it would vary. Like if you're a foreigner who speaks Korean well or a foreigner who can't speak Korean at all, the options are going to be different. What I also think is a lot of people are not aware of where they can find part-time jobs that are suited for them. And when I say people, I mainly mean foreigners. So I hope that if nothing else, that this video can serve as a good, you know, stepping stone for you to at least get started to look at the sources for you, for where you can find a part-time job. All right, so I hope that I've answered all of the questions that you might have about getting a part-time job here in Korea. Of course, if you still have more questions, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment down below in the comment section. I'm also going to put several links in the description bar for, you know, you to check if you meet the guidelines to work part-time, or if you're actually looking for a part-time job. I'll include some of the resources that I mentioned earlier. And I hope that that will get you, you know, started on the right direction. I'm going to do my absolute best to stay consistent with my YouTube channel this time. And again, this is going to be a series. So if you want to find out how to get a full-time job or how to get an internship, make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss any notifications on when I come out with my next video. As always, thanks for watching. Bye! 다음에 봐요.